All right, we now welcome on to the podcast, as most Yankee fans are very familiar with him from the Yes Network pre-games as well as the post-game shows. Mr. Jack Curry joins us. Jack, thank you for hopping on. We've found a time to be able to talk to each other. How you doing today?
I'm doing well, Rob. It's a pleasure to join you and Tyler. I appreciate your persistence and your patience in trying to make sure we can make this happen. I'm looking forward to talking some Yankee baseball with you. It's been an interesting season so far, one that has already included an 11-game winning streak. And so Yankee fans have to be happy about that and where the Yankees stand right now.
Yeah, absolutely. We caught you at a pretty good time. I know yesterday we had the loss, but I mean, 11-game winning streak, you can't complain at all. So we'll also later, after talking about some Yankees, we'll get into his latest book with Paul O'Neill, Swinging a Hit, 9 innings of what baseball taught me. So we'll get into that a little bit later. But just to kind of start off with the Yankees, I mean, a hot start, and it was a kind of polar opposite, we would say, at least for Yankee fans last year. Very frustrating season to start in 2021, and it's kind of a polar opposite start for 2022 with the 11-game winning streak, and how overall there hasn't really been too many weaknesses that we could see on this team. And you know, it's a good sight for Yankee fans to see, and it's an exciting buzz. The stadium felt different, at least when I was there. I went for the Cleveland game where all the craziness happened, a little bit too crazy for that, but the energy is different with Yankee fans now. So Jack, the question I have for you, what would you say is kind of at least early on, what do you see is a lot different with this stretch for 2022 versus the 2021 Yankees as early on as it is?
Well, they're playing much better defense. This is a better defensive team, and defense isn't always the sexiest topic to talk about. But heading into this season, the Yankees wanted to improve on that side of the ball, and they clearly have. They remade the left side of their infield. They've upgraded behind the plate because Higashioka and Trevino are better defensive catchers than Sanchez was, better framers particularly. Hicks, if he can stay healthy, gives you that added element of above average defense in the outfield. But guys, also the ability to play Judge in center field and how he's done it so well. So the defense stands out for me. Also, the versatility and the diversity of the lineup. The Yankees are always going to hit a lot of home runs. Stanton, Judge, Rizzo, Donaldson, those guys are always going to go deep. But we're now seeing a lineup that is putting the ball in play more. The Yankees are running more. We've seen some hit and runs and things like that. And I think they understood some of their issues in last year and previous seasons, and they've tried to attack them. And then I don't know if this is a change, but also I just look at the evolution of Michael King as a pitcher. I've said this on our pregame and postgame a couple of times. You look at the Yankee bullpen, and I think their bullpen is stacked. Coming into this season, he had the thinnest resume of anyone in that bullpen, and I'm leaving Marinaccio and Sears off to the side. He's their most reliable reliever right now. He's the guy that if Boone had to get one guy out right now, the guy he would call from the pen is Michael King. So I think those are some of the things that I've seen, and it's interesting when an offseason plan starts to come to fruition because they wanted more contact hitters. They wanted a more diverse lineup. Rizzo from the left side obviously helps that as well, although he was there for a part of last year. And they wanted better defense. And I think we've seen a more entertaining brand of baseball as well.
Jack, I'm glad you mentioned Michael King because me and Rob have been huge Michael King fans for some time now. So we kind of harped on it in the offseason as well, saying, hey, I mean, Yankees don't really have like a swingman right now that can go 2, maybe 3 innings, and he just kind of goes in there and just mows them down for the most part. But you know, before we get away from the winning streak, how can you kind of compare this one to last year's 13-game winning streak? What are kind of the takeaways from, I guess, the most recent one, and then what's kind of the difference between the two?
It's a great question, Tyler. I know they had that 13-game winning streak last year. I just feel as if this team right now, I know it was only 11. I know it's still early in the season. A lot of things can happen. Mm-hmm. I think this Yankee team is better. I think the 2022 version is better than 2021. So when I think about comparing the teams, maybe not necessarily comparing the streaks, I think the rotation is better. I think the bullpen is better. I've already talked about the lineup and the defense. So I think Yankee fans should look at this 11-game winning streak and say to themselves, wow, there's more to come. You look at the Yankees' May schedule, it's pretty soft. This is a team that by the end of May could put itself in a really nice position for the rest of the season. Now, we know how long the season is. The Atlanta Braves were about a 500 team, 100 games through last year. A couple years back, the Washington Nationals were 19-31. So you have to remind yourself of how long the season is, but you want to play consistently. You want to come to the ballpark and feel that you can win every day and kind of get that confident approach going. And the thing that I've noticed with this Yankee team from being out at the stadium a few times is I feel as if that confidence is there and that this team may already have more confidence than that 2021 team might have had in itself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I would ask your quick take on this, going back to, the stretch that they've had over this winning streak. And a lot of it, on the last podcast, I kind of was venting about this other fan bases that would be like, oh, you're playing against the Orioles, you're playing against the Tigers. And the frustrations that we had last year was they weren't beating those teams when they had the opportunity to do that. And that's kind of the difference that I really see with this team, is that they're taking care of business in those instances. And then, outside of obviously the loss to the Orioles in that series, that bad series in Baltimore, they go ahead and they still beat the Red Sox. They still are beating the Blue Jays. They split with the Blue Jays and they beat the Blue Jays this series. So that's kind of one of the, the differences that we've been able to see, that you say, okay, they're handling their business early on, because Yankee fans kind of understood, even though it's 162 games, it's important to take care of business against the bad teams and beat up and get fat in that respect.
Yeah, they were 11-8 against the Orioles last year, and that's honestly, that's unacceptable. And you want to have respect for every team that you play, and you want to say that any team can beat any team on any given day, and that is true. But the Orioles were a team that won 50-something games last year. You have to do better than 11-8. So I totally agree with you that we've seen them finishing off series. And guys, I always chuckle at they haven't beat anybody argument, because
hate it.
It doesn't make its own schedule. You have to beat the teams who are on your schedule. And as you said, Rob, there were instances last year where they didn't do that. This is no secret, and I'm not the first person to say this. If you think the AL East is going to be a packed and tight division this year, and I believe that it's going to be, the team that performs the best against the Orioles might be the team that ends up being the tallest team in the division. The Rays were 18-1 against them last year and won the division. A couple years back, the Yankees were 17-2 when they won the division against the Orioles. And I believe the Red Sox were 16-3 the year they won the division. So beat up on those teams. And the Yankees see the Orioles, I believe, 2 more times in May. So there are opportunities for that to happen, and to make sure that you don't let a team like that ruin the positive path that you're on.
Got to take care of business against who you got. Jack, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the pitching so far. I feel like, not even the rotation and the depth of the pitching in general has improved since last year, but kind of how did we get to this point? I mean, just a couple of years ago, we were thinking, hey, I mean, now we have an ace, but we don't really know what we have in the middle. I mean, are we kind of giving all the credit to Matt Blake almost as a mix of, bringing a guy like Corey Kluber in the locker room last year, who kind of may have had an impact on Mike King? I have a little bit of suspicion there. But how do you think we kind of, got to the point of having a staff this deep all around?
It's interesting that you asked that question, because I was texting with a few people, I'll just say a few members of the organization yesterday. And the answer to your question is, I think it's a cumulative effect. Corey Kluber, throw his name in there, absolutely. Michael King has talked about that. Matt Blake deserves a lot of credit as well. But I think the organization as a whole is the entity that deserves the credit for having these pitchers develop, making them better. I mean, Nestor Cortez is throwing a cutter now. Tyone is throwing a cutter now. Those are things that the organization and that the coaches suggested and have worked well for them. Jordan Montgomery continues to evolve as a pitcher. Cole's, he's out on an island. He's a terrific pitcher, and he's a guy who he's so involved with what he does that he's going to make sure that he continues to get better. And I think it's just a process where their pitchers are a lot better than I think people gave them credit for, especially the rotation. Going into last night, they had a top 5 ERA in the major leagues, their rotation. It was under 3. Their starters have allowed 3 earned runs or fewer, I think, in all but 1 or 2 starts. So I think it's been a process. I think it's been trusting the pitchers that they have in front of them. And also, guys, honestly, people coming back from injuries. Let's not forget who Severino was in 17 and 18. Can he climb back to being that guy after overcoming all of these injuries? If he can, and I think there are glimpses to show you that that's a possibility, wow. Then if you could line up Cole and Severino to pitch the first 2 games of a potential postseason series for you, I think you're feeling really good about your chances.
Absolutely. And it's kind of crazy to see. I mean, we had, not a knock on Wandy Peralta at all, but he was closing very big games last year, for example, against the Atlanta Braves. I believe, I don't remember if that game went into the 10th or the 9th or what it was, but he was kind of on mop-up duty the other night. So it's crazy to see just how deep they got so fast.
I'm glad you brought that up because I didn't mean to undermine the pitchers who finished out that 9-1 game. But a lot of times you'll ask a manager about who are you going to use in high leverage situations and who's your guy if this situation arises. And Aaron Boone, he wants everybody in his bullpen to feel wanted. But I think they showed you in that 9-1 game who their back end of the bullpen guys were. And you're right, it was Peralta, it was Litke, and it was Castro. And by the way, I do think Castro was a steal from the Mets to get him for Rodriguez. I love that move. But the guys they are relying on more heavily are King. We know Chapman's at the end of the game. Loizaga, Green, and Holmes. And they've got a lot of guys who throw that heavy sinker and get some swings and misses or get some ground ball outs. So you're right. That shows you a lot when Peralta is one of the guys who was mopping up after what he did last year.
Yeah.
To kind of shift over to the offensive side of the ball, I want to get your thoughts on the craziness that Aaron Judge is on right now. He is, beyond hot right now. It's crazy to see. And I was telling Tyler, I think, early on through the first series, there was kind of a little bit of buzz about him and the contract negotiations and what he was asking for. And we all know the figures. And I think I think he was kind of keying in and listening to what was being said as much as, as cool and calm and collected as he is when it comes to being in the media. But I'm sure some of that came across. What do you make of what Judge is doing right now?
I never thought that the contract negotiation fallout, unsuccessful attempt to get an extension done was going to bother Judge. And here's why. Judge set the deadline. Judge was offered a contract that could have made him a Yankee for life, which is what he said he wanted. But clearly, he kind of meant a Yankee for life if the terms meet what I think they should meet. And the Yankees didn't meet those terms. So now they go back to their respective corners. I don't want to use a boxing analogy, but they go back to their sides. They let a season unfold. Judge bets on himself, and we see where things land. I remember saying to somebody, I forget how many games it was. What have they played? 25 games so far? Mm-hmm. Judge had 1 homer through the first 12, 13, 14 games, whatever it was. And somebody was asking me about the Yankee offense. And I said, do you really think Judge is going to hit 1 home run every 13 games this year? No. You have to let the season breathe. You have to let a guy get some at-bats under his belt. The shortened spring training was a factor for some guys. So, Rob, to hone in on what he has been doing, this guy, when healthy, is a top 5 or a top 10 player in the major leagues. And when he maintains control of the strike zone and forces pitchers to throw strikes and doesn't stray, he can do the kind of damage that he is doing right now. And I think that at bat against Manoah the other night, where he hit the home run that tied the game, that exemplifies exactly who he can be. Falls behind 0-2, doesn't bite on a few sliders in a row, kind of forces Manoah to get to a point where, well, I've got to throw this guy a fastball, and Judge just destroys it. So he bet on himself for this season. Yankee fans love seeing this guy. I love the interaction he had with the 2 fans yesterday, the Blue Jay fan and the 9-year-old Yankee fan. I think Judge rises to the moment in those occasions too. So it's been a real pleasure for Yankee fans to watch him hit.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously we can't be the start that they've had is just, there's not a lot, like each episode that we've done so far this season, it's been hard picking out little, flaws in the roster, flaws on this team. but what do you think is going to be a determining factor of what sustains this success? Is it the pitch? Where do you key in on the pitching staff? Is it someone within the offense that needs to get going? Is it a guy like a Joey Gallo, or is it Judge continued success, or Stanton, or where do you see that this is going to be a team? This is going to be the guy or the group of guys that's going to help them get past the 92 win mark, or hopefully, as we want, win the division and then make a run.
I don't think it's ever one guy, and I think within your question, you gave part of the answer. I always think it's about pitching. I always think you have to have representative starting pitching, guys who can take you deep into the games. I have no doubt about their bullpen. I think their bullpen is the strength of the team. I think the challenge for Boone is to make sure that he uses this bullpen in a way that guys stay fresh, guys can be effective, that guys aren't overused. And that's why some length from the starters matters as well. You bring up a guy like Joey Gallo. Yes, of course, the Yankees, to have a complete lineup, they need to see better at-bats from him. He has been better recently. I thought he had a couple of good at-bats last night, including the home run. But I just think it's a continuation of what we've seen so far. It's that really solid pitching, and it's that belief that when you get a lead, that bullpen phone is going to be on, and it's going to be busy, and they're going to try and shut you down. I think their lineup is really sound. I look at the catching side of things, and the defense has been terrific. Higashioka and Trevino have kind of been a black hole offensively. So though the Yankees knew they weren't going to get much offense from that position, as you said, Rob, it's kind of hard to pick apart when the team is 18-7. But you need some offense from them. It can't be an endless string of 0 for 4s. So I do think that's a place where they would like to get some production. And as much as we've talked about Kiner, Falefa, and Donaldson, the one thing that I said coming into this season, what's going to help the Yankees also is that the guys who underperformed last year, who were Yankees, if they rise up and produce, we've already mentioned Gallo. I put LeMahieu, Torres, and Hicks in that bucket as well. And so far, especially with DJ and even Hicks, you're seeing that those guys have produced. We've seen decent moments out of Torres, and I think there's more to come. And then the story still needs to be written with Gallo.
Yeah, I've always said, I was continued saying, as it's crazy the difference when DJ is DJ, or even, we would always talk about not sure if he's going to get to that MVP level in 2019 and around then. But even just the production that he's giving now just completely changes the way that the offense operates, it seems. So
he looks to me like a hitter who's on a mission. I think, though DJ LeMahieu, the way that he's attacking early in counts, he's swinging at the first pitch a lot more often and having success. And you also can see it in just the way he's hitting the ball. His exit velocity is up again, hitting the ball the opposite way. So I think you're right. And I know Boone has experimented and more than experimented. He's done it. He's moved him down in the lineup and has him hitting fifth sometimes. I have no qualms with DJ LeMahieu being your leadoff guy. He hit leadoff over 140 times last year. I get what Boone is trying to do. He wants to have LeMahieu up with some guys on base more often, which is fine. But him being back to who he is, Rob, you're right. That's a big part of this offense being what it needs to be.
Absolutely. Yeah, Tyler, you got another question? Or I was going to ask about the time with the book, and once again, the book, Swinging a Hit, 9 Innings of What Baseball Taught Me, talking about Paul O'Neill. So me and Tyler, we were born in 98. So we were born right during the golden ages, right? So I would hear from my dad, and obviously my brother as well, because he was younger around that time, about how amazing the teams are, and how we would hear from older fans and books such as this about what those glory days were like. But what kind of insight would we get? I'm looking forward to picking up the book now. I'm gonna go get myself a copy and read about it. What for maybe younger fans that want to learn about that time, what would you say is some maybe a story, maybe something that we could learn that would be something interesting?
Well, you talk about 1998, and a lot of people will argue that is the one of the greatest teams of all time. They won 125 games when you count the playoffs. But obviously, you guys were not on this earth yet when the Yankees won the World Series in 1996. So much is made about the core four, and it should be. Jeter, Mariano, Jorge, and Pettit were tremendous. But when you talk about the sea change in the Yankee organization and what changed from them being a 90-plus loss team in the early 90s to a team that looked like it could have advanced to the World Series in 1994 before there was no World Series, to a playoff round loss against the Mariners in epic fashion in 95, and then winning it in 96, people will point to the Paul O'Neill trade. Gene Michael getting Paul O'Neill from the Cincinnati Reds for Roberto Kelly. Don Mattingly, and he's quoted in the book saying this, that was the change, because O'Neill was not going to accept mediocrity. He was not going to accept being average. And here was this guy who came in from Ohio, already had a World Series ring with the Reds, was a little worried about coming to New York, didn't know how he would fit in. And he ended up being the guy who was instrumental in changing things around. So Rob and Tyler, I think what you'll get from this book is a lot of why Paul O'Neill was as intense and as passionate as he was. You'll get a lot of stories about hitting, a lot of advice and theories about hitting. But the one thing we also tried to do in this book was infiltrate Paul's mind in talking about the greatest hitting influences who he had. So you will hear about Pete Rose. You'll hear about his relationship with Lou Piniella, Don Mattingly, Derek Jeter, Bernie Williams, Joe Torre. There's even an entire chapter about Ted Williams, because Ted Williams once called him up out of the blue and gave him a hitting lesson over the phone. So I think if you love baseball, you love the Yankees, you love O'Neill, there's a lot to chew on in this book.
That's awesome. It's going to be a perfect Father's Day gift for my dad, because he is
tell everybody, tell people the best thing you can do for an author is pre-order his or her book. Because awesome. The more orders that start before the book is even out, well, then the book companies start to give you a little more promotion and all that. So yeah.
Absolutely.
Tyler, you're on it, baby. You're on it.
Oh, I'm on it. I'm already there. Yeah. My dad is a huge Paul O'Neill fan. Actually, a few weeks ago, he sent me something, when the whole stadium was chanting his name in that World Series, and he was like, it still gives me crazy chills just watching this today on YouTube.
That's in there. That's in chapter 9. We talk about that final game. Right. One of the most emotional Paul has ever felt on a baseball field.
That's awesome.
I believe it. Yeah.
That's awesome. Last quick question. Is there anyone, I know Paul O'Neill's like obviously unique player, unique character. Is there anyone that gives you his kind of vibe on this team, or no? If you had to.
That's a great question, Rob. Wow. Not the personality, because we just talked about it.
Yeah.
But the player that Paul most associates with, and we talk about this in the book, is DJ LeMahieu. Because
that's awesome. Okay.
He hits the ball to all fields. He's a contact guy. He's a grinder. He's a gritty guy. Doesn't have the power that O'Neill had, but O'Neill really associates with him. In terms of attitude, we're still getting to know him. But do you know who is the guy who I think is O'Neill-like? Is Josh Donaldson.
I was gonna
That's
say
what I was thinking, yeah.
Or demeanor. And by the way, guys, I had a conversation with Donaldson when I was at the stadium last week, and we have a certain amount of time where you can be in the clubhouse, and the clubhouse was going to close at 11. And I think I started talking to him about 10:45. It was a hitting lesson supreme. This guy loves to talk about hitting, loves to get in depth with what works for him. Because I told him I had written the book with O'Neill, and we started talking about different philosophies. And Josh believes in hitting under the ball, hitting the bottom half of the ball and driving through it because he wants to get the ball in the air. Paul believed in swinging at the top of the baseball and still driving through it because he was more of a contact guy. And if you try to hit the top of the ball, you're going to put the ball in play more often. So it was a good give and take with Josh about that. He would be the guy, I think, in terms of being fiery, who reminds me the most of O'Neill.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's the debate that continues to rage on now with older fans and newer fans. We'll see it on Twitter a lot of talking about approaches at the plate. I think we all know about that MLB Network video of Donaldson explaining the kind of philosophy there. So yeah.
Yeah, he told me, I asked him about that video, and he said that he and DeRosa had an off-season conversation at a golf tournament. So he knew they were going to talk hitting.
Yeah.
He never knew they were going to get that in depth, is what he said. He didn't think it was going to go that long and last that long. But yeah, there's a lot of wisdom in there. And the thing that Paul also says in his book, he gives a ton of hitting advice. He gives a lot of guidance, but it's your comfort level. Whoever you are as a hitter, it's got to work for you. There are different paths to being a great and productive hitter.
Yeah, it's awesome. I can't wait to read it. Get some insight to those days and kind of hear his philosophy behind hitting. But Jack, thank you very much for coming by and chatting with us for a little bit of time and giving us some insight on the team and a little bit of your perspective.
Well, Rob, Tyler, it was my pleasure. I appreciate your passion, and I wish you guys the best of luck with everything as you go forward.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jack. Appreciate it.